insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. On this episode, we are talking to my friend Steve Watt. Welcome, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me on, Britta. Great to see you. I always enjoy our little chats, and I'm glad we're having an opportunity to do something a little bigger. So,
Me too.
yeah, I'm never short of opinions, and maybe maybe some of them are good ones. So I hope we'll have a conversation that might be interesting and relevant for your viewers and your listeners. I work in the space of social selling, employee advocacy, enterprise sales, marketing. A little bit of a Swiss Army knife in a lot of these places, and I work for Seismic, which is the world's largest sales enablement platform.
Fantastic. Well, I am so excited to talk to you, Steve, about all things social selling, personal branding, building community, and I think it's going to be a great show. So why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about your career journey. So you're here to there and how you've gotten to where you are right now.
It's funny when you say career journey here to there, people envision something that's at least somewhat linear. Couldn't be further from the truth. I've had a career wander, let's say. I've been around a lot of places, a lot of industries. It looks like there's absolutely no purpose to it. It's been a absolute wander, but when I actually step back, I recognize there has been a little more direction to it than maybe it might appear. I've sort of been always drawn to what's new and what's growing, I think is what it comes down to. My first job out of university was at Staples, which at the time, I'm pretty old, so I was new. That was a big thing. Like big box stores like Home Depot and Staples were rocking the world of retail. Like this was before Amazon. If Amazon even existed, they were like a little online bookstore, right? Big box stores were rocking the world. And I went in there. I was the first management trainee at Staples Canada. I was the first buyer at Staples Canada. We went through massive growth. There was one store in Canada, one Staples store when I started, and there was 100 when I left 6 years later. And I got like half a dozen promotions, and I was like young. I was like in my mid-20s, and I had like a $50 million budget for buying. Like it was wild. It was a wild ride. So very new, and it was very fresh, and I was all in it. And then like e-commerce started to really become a thing, and my wife had this business that she was not yet taking online, and I'm like, that needs to be online. So I left, joined her, and spent the next 6 or 8 years building an e-commerce business when that was like super new and super unknown. And then I worked for one of the world's largest toy companies, but they were all just about selling stuff on like the floor, like at Toys R Us and Walmart and Target. And I was the guy saying, Amazon's a thing now, and digital marketing's a thing, not just TV. And so I was the like sort of pioneer within that firm trying to get us more digital. And then I went to work for LinkedIn when that was new. And then I went to like a bunch of little SaaS startups. So, the reality is had I actually picked the path and stuck with it, I'd probably would have made a lot more money, but I probably wouldn't have as much fun. So I've kind of been always like the moth to the light, going for what's new and what's interesting.
I love the theme I'm seeing in your career is really that you're willing to be on that edge of uncertainty and learning how to sort of build your reputation in that space of uncertainty. And I think that's one thing a lot of people struggle with in as they're facing their careers or facing pivots or changes they want to make, or they're feeling stuck, is this level of uncertainty and what's the next move, and how do I activate on that, and how could personal brand play into that? Could you start just by talking a little bit about some of your experience confronting uncertainty and how you've managed that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it exactly right. I think where a lot of people are afraid of that uncertainty, that ambiguity, the newness of things, I'm actually like really drawn to it. Well, I was looking back over all the jobs I've had in my career, and I realized that never once have I taken a job that already existed.
Oh,
Like not
wow.
even once have I replaced someone in a role. The typical thing is, somebody gets promoted or somebody leaves and they hire someone else for that job.
Mhm, mhm,
Not once have I ever done that. Every single job I've ever had was first person doing that. I
mhm.
was like either hired to figure it out or I was internal and I was like, hey, there's a problem over there or there's an opportunity over there. And I just started solving it, and then eventually somebody said, "Oh, I guess that's your job now," and I love that. But yeah, it's very different from uh, going into an established role with established steps and KPIs and metrics and just trying to be like 5% better than the last guy. It's
Right,
it's it's
right.
it's really different. I love it. I thrive on that, obviously, and you also have to be okay with the fact you're not always going to be successful. Like
Yeah.
I would never for a minute claim that in every one of these cases I've gone in and crushed it. Like sometimes I have, other times I've really struggled, but
Mhm.
always learn something when you take on something new.
Absolutely. I love the idea of that you're sort of allowing yourself to be okay with that uncertainty, knowing that there's this level of newness and that you can track those KPIs, but you don't necessarily they're not the be all end all, and that it's really about this learning. In the past, when we've had conversations, we've talked about mindsets, skill sets, tool sets, and how that plays into how you approach a new situation or situation of uncertainty. Can you talk a little bit about what that would look like, say if someone's confronting a pivot in their career, what would that look like?
Yeah, mindsets. I'm always harping on about mindsets. You're right about that. I mean, it's critical to everything, and that doesn't just mean like, oh, be positive all the time, yay. That's part of it. Like honestly, you'll have a happier life and you'll get a lot further in life if you're fundamentally optimistic. But it's not enough, right? I think I mean, people talk a lot about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. That's an obvious part of it, right? I mean, someone with a fixed mindset is focused on the limitations, the limitations of the situation, the problems. Someone with a growth mindset sort of has an attitude of like, well, I don't know it yet, but I can figure it out. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what is around the next bend, but I'll figure it out. It'll be okay. And I think having a growth mindset, I don't know if that's something, there's people who like study this stuff. I'm not one of them. I don't know if you're born with a growth mindset, if it is instilled in your formative years by your parents and your schooling, or if it's something that you can develop. I don't know, but I kind of feel like I've always had that attitude of like, yeah, I can probably figure this out. And it's got to be a bit of a balance. Like that could lead you to being way overconfident and cocky and making a big mess. And so you got to balance that, right? You got to have confidence that I can probably figure that out. But then you also have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be willing to be very upfront with your limitations and say, like, I am not the one to figure that out. Like that is way out of my range, but this one I can probably figure that out. So there's a balance there. And you got to know how to work with others. You've got to, so there's a lot that goes on, but I do think that growth mindset, that willingness to not just willingness, but eagerness to step into the gray area of ambiguity and uncertainty is really important. And then I think there's also like a sense of, you got to be a self-starter.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't be a perfectionist. Like you really can't. I'm always eager to jump into new things and climb big mountains, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I have to be okay with the fact that it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be as fast as you want.
Yeah.
I'm not a perfectionist, and I think that's actually helpful. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably an hour worth of talk about mindset. I'm no expert in that space.
Yeah.
I'm not just self-analyzing as you're asking me these good questions. But yeah, I think it's that confidence, growth mindset, willingness to embrace ambiguity, willingness to seek help, and comfort with not always being on top of everything.
Yeah, I think that is such a great point about willingness to have comfort with that ambiguity, and I feel like that's what holds a lot of people back from really activating on their personal brand on LinkedIn, or just activating on a personal brand in general. What if, let's say someone comes to you and says, like, personal brand, what the heck is that about? Why is that important? What would you tell them? What would you say to them about that?
Yeah, I'd say it's super important, and I wish I understood that a lot earlier. I probably would have got a lot further in this whole journey had I kind of figured that stuff out earlier. I think especially in our social media age and Instagram and TikTok and stuff, there can be a sense of vanity and superficiality and like, oh, personal brand, this person wants to be an influencer, this person wants to take selfies everywhere they go, and it's like that is not me. I've never once shared a selfie on social, and I probably never will, but I'm super active in other ways. So I think that the whole idea, what is brand even, like to me it's just reputation, right? It's are you seen, are you heard, are you understood? Have you developed a reputation? Have you developed a bunch of relationships? Do people kind of know you, like you, begin to trust you? I mean, that's the kind of stuff it is about to me. It's not about brand as some shiny thing or some vanity thing, and it's not about how many followers you have. So I mean, I guess the first thing, and this kind of weaves our two topics of mindset together with personal brand, right? I would say to that person who comes to me, let's unpack what you mean by personal brand and what I mean. Are we even talking about the same thing? Because if you want to be some influencer who gets paid to travel and share 20 selfies a day, I'm not the person to advise you in any way. Not at all. But if you want to kind of build your reputation, all this kind of stuff, I could probably help you with that. Something else I learned in the post-COVID world is the importance of personal brand internally when you work for a mid-sized or a large company.
Oh, wow.
In a work from home world, especially in a work from home world, we can get very isolated. We can get very siloed. And, we work with the same people all the time. We're on a million Zoom calls or whatever with the same people all the time. But meanwhile, all these other people in the company have no idea who you are. And so I work for Seismic, as I said at the outset. We're about a 1,500 person company. And, the smaller company I worked for was acquired by them during COVID. So I had never met the vast majority of these people. And of course, a bunch of them I'd had Zoom calls and stuff with. So there was some degree of personal connection. But when we finally came together, at a whole 1,500 people from around the world. We came together for 4 days together in San Diego. And I lost count. It was way over 100 people who came up to me and were like, Steve, I love your LinkedIn posts. Steve, I love those. I'm so excited to meet you. And oh my God, it was gratifying. And this was from senior executives right on down. And I was like, wow, I never actually thought about the power of personal brand internally. I was kind of more focused on, building my reputation with our customers and with our prospects and, stuff like that, which is important for sure. But the internal thing was really powerful. And it was funny. I remember at one of the first parties we had there, I was walking through this area with one of my coworkers, and people kept stopping us and coming up to us and talking to me and hugging me and shaking my hand. And after a few of them, he turned to me and said, how come everybody knows you and nobody knows me? And I was like, what are you doing? in, buddy. You know, like, so yeah. Like I think, you know, for me, personal brand, it's not a vanity thing. It's being seen and heard and understood in positive ways and building a good reputation. And I'll value that highly forever.
Yeah, and I think too, the other thing that's rising to the surface here as I'm listening to you tell these stories about people internally in your organization that really resonated with your personal brand is that a personal brand in general is an opportunity to build trust and rapport on the front end without and attracting the right kinds of people to you. Can you speak a little bit more about how personal brand has helped you grow trust with people and trust with your prospects?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, again, because it's not that vanity play, it's about having a perspective. You know, like, I'm not out on social channels or on podcasts or anything else talking about like, yay me, I'm so smart, you know, and some people do that. And it's really off-putting, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, I have a point of view. I have a perspective on a lot of things, on sales, on marketing, on social selling, on employee advocacy, on company culture. I've got a lot of opinions, and not everyone is going to agree with everything I say, and that's okay. Again, I'm okay with uncertainty and ambiguity, and I don't go out and try to be, you know, I'm not a shock jock. I'm not trying to be provocative for, you know, for the sake of being provocative. But I'm not afraid to express my perspective. And as much as I can to back it up with stories, with data, with insights, with something. But honestly, sometimes it's just an opinion. It's just a perspective. And I think you got to get comfortable with that. And then that becomes the foundation of your personal brand. It's not like, oh, you know, there's Britta, the person who's always talking about herself. Instead, it's, oh, there's Britta, the person who talks about X and talks about Y. And, you know, I don't always agree with her, but I respect the fact that she knows about that stuff, she cares about that stuff, and she's out there with an honest intent to drive a valuable conversation. Like, to me, that's a super important brand and reputation to develop. And you said, what does it mean with prospects and stuff like that? Well, I'll tell you, I do a lot of sales calls, and I would say at least 1 out of 4 of those times where I'm on a first call with people I've never spoken to before, someone on the other side of that call is like, Steve, I'm so glad to meet you. Been reading your LinkedIn posts. I shared some of them with my boss. And so like my reputation got into the room before I did. Like, wow, that's magic. This is gonna go well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, still got a lot of work to do here, but that's a good start. So yeah, when you can really show up and speak up and be authentic, but have a purpose behind it, it really can open a lot of doors for you.
What would you tell someone who says that they have a fear of speaking up, or that they have sort of a lack of confidence, or they say, geez, Steve, I'm not a thought leader. I don't have any thoughts to share or opinions that anybody wants to hear. What would you tell them about that?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people have an unrealistically high bar for what it takes, you know, and I've had very similar questions or comments to that, Britta, where people have said like, well, I can't, you know, speak at these things or write about these. Like, I'm not a CEO. I'm not a founder. I didn't write a book. You know, I'm not. Yeah, but let's not focus on what you're not. Let's focus on what you are, right? And what you've learned. And we all have areas of expertise. We all have areas where we're learning. Even people who are very new in their career, they're in like I work with, oftentimes when I'm working with sales teams, and part of that is working with really seasoned sales executives, but it's also working with BDRs, SDRs, you know, people who are, you know, probably a year or two at most out of school, and this may well be their first job or their first job besides, you know, working in a clothing store or something, and they're like, who on earth would want to listen to me? So, again, it comes back to mindset. You're not
Yeah.
going to go out there and pretend like you're the expert. You're not going to go out there and pretend like you have all this experience or you're someone that you're not. Let's get real about where you are. What are you learning? What are you experiencing? What have you learned in your first 6 months in this job? What do you now understand differently? What are some of the common questions that your customers or your prospects are asking you? What are some of the common objections that you hear, and how are you overcoming them? Maybe what are some skills that you struggled with in the first few months, but you're getting better at now? Like,
Right.
you've got something to give. You really do have something to give. And if you think that you have to be some super expert before you open your mouth, you're really unnecessarily holding yourself back.
I think you're totally right. And I think at least for me, when I was just beginning my journey of building my personal brand, 5-6 years ago, I thought, I couldn't possibly share my opinion, or nobody would really want to listen to me. And the point is, actually, people really value humanity in a personal brand. They value relatability, and when you make mistakes or you learn from things that have been tough, those sometimes are the most compelling types of content, and not even just beyond what's compelling, but it draws people to you that are really real and authentic. What would you say was an example where somebody who thought they didn't have anything to say really excelled, and you saw it have big results?
Yeah. Well, let's go off. We talked a lot about online. Like, we talked a lot about LinkedIn here, which I'm a big fan of, big advocate of, and it's a big part of what I do, but it's not the only thing. Let's go offline. No, this was pre-COVID, but these things are coming back now. Live events are coming back.
Thank God, right?
I used to run a meetup group for marketers, and I would invite people to speak. Every month we had an event, and I'd invite 1 or 2 marketers to speak, and to really just take the group through what they were working on, where they were thriving, where they were struggling, and it became a really strong community. It was pretty great. And I remember in particular one young woman. She was quite junior, quite early in her career, but like super smart, and she was doing some great stuff. And I can't even remember how I got introduced to her, but as soon as I started talking to her one time, I was like, yeah, she's good. And I invited her to speak, and she just knocked it out of the park. She was amazing.
Wow.
She went up there, and again, she wasn't saying like, I'm the world's leading expert in this. She was saying, here's what I'm doing, and here's what my company's doing, and here's what's working, and here's where we're struggling, and here's what we think we need to solve next. And people loved it and loved her. And a whole bunch of people, myself included, tried to recruit her later.
Wow.
And no one didn't pick any of us up on it. She's still with the same company she was at. So obviously she's respected internally, at least as much as she was respected externally. And her career has continued to grow and thrive with her employer. But I remember talking with her like a little while after, and she said, this was so great. Like, I didn't know I had that much to give, but I stepped up to the opportunity. It was scary, but it was awesome. And like, she was amazing. And she put more out there, and to your point, in a more authentic human way than I've seen a lot of like professional speakers do, who kind of know they're going through a format. Like, there's a structure. Like, hers was just, it was really honest, but it was packed with insight. It was packed with real examples, and it was awesome. So yeah, don't be afraid. Like, get out. Just as I said a moment ago, though, don't try to pretend that you're something that you're not. Like, it's not fake it till you make it. It's not that at all. It's like, be you, and be honest about where you are and what you know and what you don't know, and what you're trying to achieve that you haven't achieved yet. People really respect that.
Yeah, I would say they do respect that. And I think too, every time that I've shared some sort of post or some sort of insight in person with people, that both shares my wins and places where I've fallen short, or things that I've learned every single time I've had a response where someone has taken away something valuable from what I've had to say. And by and large, I historically never thought that I had a whole lot to offer, but just putting myself out there little by little, you start to realize, oh, I might have something to say. And have you seen people make that evolution through COVID as they've tried to understand how to activate and build networks, on LinkedIn? On other
but there's also a watch out there. There's a concern. I've seen people lose their way because they become too focused on vanity metrics, too focused on, now we're back onto social, right? Too focused on like working to the algorithm.
Yeah.
Or what kind of post gets the most views, gets the most likes, gets the most comments. Oh, well, if I'm funnier, and if I'm, oh wow, that meme got a ton of engagement. Oh boy, I do that again. And I've seen people who started out with a real honest perspective, like all the stuff we're talking about. And I've seen them lose their way. And I've seen them turn into comedy accounts and meme accounts and lose their way. And you know what? They always quit later because at some point, they have a epiphany that this is not helping me. Like I set out to like build my career and, be better as a salesperson or a marketer or whatever it was that I was. And then I got a taste of going a little bit viral with this and that. And then I, over time it became like, just like, puppy videos and and tons of but it, what, it didn't help me. It didn't build my reputation. It didn't build any valuable relationships. It didn't build any trust. It didn't help me in my career. So why am I doing this? And I quit. So, it's an interesting thing. Like, you do need to like get out there. But you gotta not lose sight of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, because it is really easy to be seduced by the dopamine hit of the viral post. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love when it happens to me. I love it. It's fun. Woo! But then I always say, but that's, I always say, your biggest posts aren't going to be your most important posts. And I do funny posts. I do little video memes. I do some of that. It's fun. It's fun for me. It's fun for the people who read my stuff. But I make sure it stays like kind of like maybe 1/3 of what I do. And I'm fine with the fact that, just this happens all the time. Just last week, but it also happens most weeks. I'll have 1 or 2 posts that will be runaway success, but they're very seldom the important ones. And those much smaller posts where I really lay out a worldview, a perspective, some insights, some learning, an important story, those are the ones that people remember. And those are the ones that kind of make me a magnet. And those are the ones that people reach out to me and like, Steve, I've been reading your stuff. Can we talk? Like, I think you and your company might be able to solve the problems we're having. And that never happens after the kitten video.
The viral whatever. I think that's so interesting. Virality to what end? If does it build your reputation? Maybe great, but if it doesn't, if it's just, hey, this is funny and I'm gonna like it, if it doesn't add to the conversation, just like you're saying, then what's the point?
I purposely look for fun and funny stuff that has a point. The point that ties into my, an exercise I've often gone through. I've taken a number of executives and others and more junior people also through this exercise of finding your voice. And it's kind of like, what do you believe? And then who needs to hear it, right? And it's this whole exercise I do with them. So if I can find funny stuff that relates to what I believe and who I believe needs to hear it, well, bonus, because now I can have some fun. But it's not random fun. It's not just like, well, that was a funny comic. It's like, that was a funny comic that kind of hit close to home, made an important point about sales.
Stung a little bit, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
don't when you're getting out there, don't lose sight of who you are, who the audience is that you're trying to reach, and what kind of reputation you're really trying to build.
So I guess to summarize this whole conversation that we've had about leaning into uncertainty, building your personal brand, and building it with authenticity, the one thing that's coming through for me, one is that part of it is about building community, like building community in every space you enter, whether that's in person or online or whatever version of whatever comes in the future, the metaverse, who knows. But building community, it seems like that is, and if you're moving towards building community, you really can't go wrong. What would you say to that, to kind of wrap up?
Yeah,
your
I'm a big believer in community, and you can build community, but you can also join community, right? Like we don't
Yeah,
have to all
yeah.
we don't have to all start, sometimes joining good communities and just being a good contributor to that community is the quickest path to reputation and relationships and trust and all that kind of stuff. Other times you build it. I mean, one time I went out seeking a meetup group for what it was I wanted to learn, realized there wasn't one. So I started it.
There
And
you
a few
go.
years later, we had like 800 people. It was awesome. But yeah, it's a lot of work, Had I found a community with 800 people doing it, I just would have joined. Shortcut, right? So yeah, you can create community, you can join community. Let's circle right back to where we started, mindsets, right? Are you going into that community, whether it's a digital community or an offline community? Are you going in with a mercenary mindset? Are you going in saying, a whole bunch of people I can pitch, a whole bunch of people I can go and try to sell them, Or are you going in saying, these are people that I can learn from. These are people who I can, they can become friends. Maybe some will become my customers. Maybe I'll go work for them or they'll come work for me. I don't know. But I'm not going in to hunt. I'm not going in to sell. I'm going in to be a good contributor in this community. And you know what? Some of that other good stuff is probably going to spin out of it.
Yeah.
But again, it's just like the way I say you thrive on LinkedIn, right? If you see LinkedIn as a community, if you see LinkedIn as a conversation, and you get out there and you become a good participant, a good member of that community, a good participant in that conversation, well, that tends to lead to all sorts of good. You get job offers, you get opportunities to sell, like you get inbound for your company or whatever. You get invited onto podcasts. All kinds of good things happen. But it starts with the mindset of, I'm going to be an active and honest participant in this community. Because if you go into that community, digital or otherwise, with a mercenary mindset, people can smell it a mile away and they avoid you.
Absolutely. Yeah, people can, and then that begins to hurt your personal brand. But I mean, that's a whole nother, we're going to keep going on different conversations, but we are nearing the end of our time. I just want to end with a couple of rapid fire questions. I'm so intrigued to hear what you have to say about these. But
here we go. It's easy to give long answers. It's hard to give short answers.
It's true. It's so true. So what is the most random job you have ever had, Steve?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. This was a very short one. But I was young and broke and between jobs, and I was doing some day labor stuff, which was hard.
Oh,
I would get up and I would be at the job center at 7 a.m. Just available body, right?
Yeah.
Strong arms, strong back. I was much younger then. And I got this, like a few day labor jobs of filling cracks in the asphalt. So I was out there in the summer, in the heat, pushing picture a giant wheelbarrow, but it's huge because it's got a heater in it that's like, heating the tar, and
Ooh.
I had to go along pushing this giant thing as it's just belching heat onto me. And you know, all the little cracks in the asphalt, I had to follow the cracks and fill them in
Oh
with
my
this thing.
God.
And oh my God, it was brutal. You ever want to work a kind of job that'll encourage you to go back to school and get a good education? Work a job like that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
During a year off when I was a little disillusioned with education, and a few jobs like that, I went back and I was an A student all the way after
Right,
that.
real quick, man.
Oh,
Okay.
that came back some memories and not necessarily good ones.
Ooh, yeah. Well, let's go on to our next rapid fire question. What is the worst career advice you have ever gotten?
Worst career advice. You know, I got to say, I've been very fortunate to get a lot of good advice over the years from a lot of really great managers and leaders. But I do remember, okay, so I remember back to, you know, talked about building that community, building that marketing community. And at one point during that, my boss said, "Why are you wasting your time doing that?"
Oh, wow.
And I want to be clear, I was not wasting company time. Like this was a passion project on the side. This wasn't evenings and weekends. I was doing my job. I was doing it well.
Mhm.
But why are you wasting your time doing that? And I just thought, we do not think alike, because the furthest thing from wasting time that I could imagine.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much. I'm meeting so many amazing people. I'm becoming really known and respected in my community.
Yeah.
And you perceive that as wasting time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much as advice. I mean, it wasn't an honest question. Like, it was not an honest inquiry about, oh, why are you doing that? It was a pointed question. Why are you wasting your time doing that? And I just thought, like, I don't think I'll ever be philosophically aligned with this person.
Well, at least it helped you identify, you know, where you might align and where you might not. But yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that about, you know, them hearing from their bosses that spending time on LinkedIn is a waste of time. And yeah, that could be a whole nother show in and of itself for us, you know, talking.
Your job, you know, you've got a job to do. Do not do LinkedIn and do not do other things instead of your work. That's not okay.
Yeah.
But when you layer that on top, it is some of the best time you're ever going to spend.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Steve. And I want to thank everyone who joined us. If you want to listen to this episode again, it'll go live on all relevant podcasting channels tomorrow. Don't forget to just subscribe to the channels, like and share with friends who you think might benefit from this information. And join me next week live at 8:30 a.m. on the Newly podcast, where you'll get more practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. See you next time, everybody.